So this is how you fight. We're going to hear from Elise Westhoff, Vivek Ramaswamy, and U.S. Senator Ted Cruz. They're going to speak in that order, one at a time, and then we'll all be back up here to have a question and answers with you in the audience. Elise is the president and CEO of the Philanthropy Roundtable, her one-year anniversary right about now. She's also on the board of SPN and the Commonwealth Foundation. Vivek Ramaswamy is an entrepreneur, a very successful entrepreneur who has transformed biopharma. He is also the author of the upcoming book, Woke Inc. And then last, and certainly not least, U.S. Senator Ted Cruz, a leading voice in American politics, a courageous conservative, and a friend to us all. And with that, please join me in welcoming Elise to the stage to start the program.
Thank you. I'm Elise Westhoff, and thank you for that kind introduction and for having me here today. It is a privilege to be here with you all. I'm going to stop on the word privilege. I'd like to own that I have it, but not in the way that you might think. I didn't have an easy childhood. My biological father suffered from severe mental illness and became abusive. After the age of 4, I wasn't able to see him. My stepfather, who raised me, grew up in rural Indiana, and our family there lacked education and was plagued by poverty, teenage pregnancy, and prison sentences. I know that doesn't sound like privilege. We weren't wealthy, and my skin color didn't solve my family's problems. My privilege came from something much deeper. I was lucky to be raised by parents who believed in a set of values that led them through dark times. Personal responsibility, integrity, respect, faith. They shared those values with me, and I embraced them. And I live in a country where we're free to pursue the life we want to lead. That is my privilege. It's the privilege of America's promise, a promise that we haven't always lived up to, but I believe that today, this is a place where with hard work and persistence, anyone from any background with any set of challenges can rise. It's the privilege of living in a land that continuously strives for liberty, equality, and opportunity for all. I have the privilege to be an American. And now I have the privilege to fight for the values that we hold dear for future generations. We all do. As we gather here, a radical agenda is being forced on our country. It wants to tear down the very system that allows so many to thrive. It threatens the principles at our country's core. If it isn't stopped, then the ideals that define America will slip away. That's the bad news. The good news is that everyone in this room can be part of the fight. Today, I will share 3 lessons that I think can help us win. The first lesson is simple. We can't just be against bad things. We have to cast a positive vision and shine a light on our solutions. This is a big one. I admit it. It's easy to focus on the problem. Critical race theory really is dangerous. The rise of socialism really is disastrous. But there are people in this country who are struggling, and there are many who want to help. We have to show them a vision of a better future and the road to get there. Every American deserves to share in this country's promise and the privileges that we enjoy. Clearly, I don't mean privilege and the way that progressives use it. They don't own the word. They think privilege is a zero-sum game, that it has to be dismantled and taken away. It's not. American values give us the framework to realize our potential. Privilege should be cherished and shared with all, but it's a two-way street. Where there are barriers and obstacles to privilege, we should eliminate them. Where we see racism, anti-Semitism, and hate, we should fight it. We can give each person pathways to opportunity, but it is up to them to write their own story. Take school choice, which is one of my passions. I've been supporting a school for foster kids in Philadelphia for years, and I mentor one of their students. After her mom died and her dad went to prison, she missed 100 days of school in a single year. Her failing public school failed her. But thanks to her new and non-traditional high school, she is graduating with the highest GPA in her class and will be studying to become a nurse. I believe in her. She has had challenges, but she also has the tools to succeed. Her situation is unique, but so is every student. Each child and family deserves access to options that work best for them. That's especially true after the pandemic and the challenges of the past year. Parents are looking for a better way, and we can show it to them. It's a similar story on every other issue. Let's cast our vision and give people something to believe in. The second lesson is this: those of us who believe in America have to collaborate. Everyone in this room knows how great our country is. We know how privileged we are. We know that our founding principles offer everyone the best chance at the best life. We also know that while those principles are self-evident, they are not self-defending. But a strong defense requires better coordination. When the going gets tough, progressives come together. We often go our separate ways. This makes sense given our different worldviews. Progressives are collectivist. They pool their resources, share their talent, and constantly communicate and strategize. We're independent. We like to compete. There's a real strength in that, but there's a weakness too. If we don't support each other in times of crisis, we'll never come through. Look around the room. Whether you are a donor, an entrepreneur, an elected official, a nonprofit leader, these are your partners. And there are others outside this room that we should invite in. Let's not get stuck on our different views or tactics. We are in this together, fighting for America's core values. It's time to look for common ground and then stand our ground. I'm confident we can do it. The final lesson is this: don't walk away from the table. We're all fighting an uphill battle. Some of you are trying to save higher ed. Some of you are fighting falsehoods in K-12 classrooms. Some of you are striving to protect free speech. None of this is easy work. I get it. Frankly, philanthropy is getting more progressive by the day, and I worry that it's failing the people that it's supposed to help. Some days I feel like giving up. Then I remember, if I walk away, I lose. If I'm still at the table, I have a chance to change minds and win hearts, and I'm not going to throw that chance away. Neither should you. As I said before, we have the privilege to fight for America. That's not a privilege we can turn our back on. If we toss in the towel, we'll lose the ideals of liberty, justice, and equality that define our great country. For me, it all comes back to my kids. I'm a mom of 3. I owe it to them to fight for the values that make our country exceptional, where everyone has the chance to achieve the American dream, where we judge people by the content of their character, not their skin color, their gender, or their religion, where we fight to treat every human being with dignity and respect. I'm committed to stay at the table, and I hope you will too. As I shared, I started life in a difficult place, but I had privilege. I embraced the values that led me to a meaningful life, and I live in a country that enables every person to thrive. There is nothing that I want more than to share my privilege. You're here because you believe in this great country. The land of the free has given us so much. Now it's time to prove ourselves worthy of the privilege. Thank you. Now my esteemed colleague and fellow board member, Vivek Ramaswamy.
Thank you, Elise. In 1993, I was in second grade, and that was when I heard Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech for the first time. That was a speech where he said, "I hope my 4 children grow up in a country where they will be judged not on the color of their skin, but on the content of their character." And that dream stuck with me. It meant something to me because it was the dream that allowed me to go in a single generation from being the kid of Indian immigrants who came to this country with almost no money to being the founder of a multi-billion-dollar company in a single generation. I led that biotech company as CEO. I got a drug approved for prostate cancer. But I left my job as CEO earlier this year to work on a different kind of cancer, not a biological cancer, but a cultural one that threatened to kill that dream from Dr. King from 60 years ago. And that is a new secular religion in this country called woke culture, which says that your identity is based on your race, your gender, and your sexual orientation, full stop. It says that America is a systemically racist country, that if you're white, you're inherently privileged, that if you're black, you're inherently disadvantaged, no matter your economic background or your upbringing. Your race and your gender govern who you are and the thoughts and ideas you're allowed to have. You are a prisoner of the color of your skin. And over the last decade, something happened where wokeism, this new philosophy, which was supposed to be about challenging the system, now is the system. So the untold story of how we got here, I think, is really important to understand before we get to the solution. And it begins, actually, with the 2008 financial crisis. If you go back a decade and a half, you remember that after the 2008 crisis, corporations were the bad guys. The old left wanted to take money from wealthy corporations and give it to poor people. But there was this new woke left that started to emerge that said, actually, the real problem wasn't poverty. It wasn't economic injustice. No, it was racial injustice and misogyny and bigotry. And that actually presented the opportunity of a generation for Wall Street, who effectively was able to put Occupy Wall Street up for adoption by adopting these new woke values instead. They agreed to lend their market power, to lend their legitimacy, to lend their dollars to this new woke movement in return for being asked to get the new woke left to work with their friends in the Democratic Party to leave their market power intact. And it worked. It worked so well that their friends on the other coast in Silicon Valley did the same thing, entered the same grand bargain, and said that in return for censoring content that the woke movement did not want to see on the internet, they would get their friends in the Democratic Party to look the other way in leaving their monopoly power intact. And again, it worked. That is the story of how this arranged marriage works between big business and the woke movement. It is not a marriage of love. It is more like mutual prostitution. And the net result has been the birth of what I think is the most complicated, nefarious, frightening phenomenon we have seen in the last century, the birth of the new woke industrial complex, something that is far more frightening than either big government or big business alone. And the story gets even worse in the last few years when there's a new interloper on the scene, a new guest that has turned this new unholy alliance, if I may say it, into a threesome. And that is the Communist Party of China, who understands this game far more deeply than any of us. There is even a Chinese word for wokeness today called baitsuo, literally refers to woke white people in the United States. They use it to laugh at us, and they use it to undermine our position on the global stage. And if you have any doubt about that, look at what Xi Jinping to every Chinese diplomat says when they are questioned about their human rights atrocities abroad. The first thing they say today is that Black Lives Matter shows that the United States is no better. And even worse, they are now using that same wokist theory to deflect accountability for the origin of COVID-19, where you could say the Marburg virus or the Zika virus or the Ebola virus or the West Nile virus or the Japanese encephalitis virus, but if you say the Wuhan virus, you are immediately bashed as a racist and a bigot. Ask yourselves why. Ask who is pulling the strings on this new game of global wokeism, and it will tell you everything you need to know. So the winners of this game are woke activists, big corporations, and the Chinese Communist Party. But the real losers of this game are the American people and American democracy as we know it. So what's the solution? Well, look, I think that we live in a moment where we have a vacuum in the conservative movement that needs to rise to the unique challenges of 2021, not the challenges of 1980. One of my heroes, Ronald Reagan, in 1980 did what he needed to do to defend individual liberty and American prosperity in his moment, which was fighting big government. He slashed government regulations, he cut taxes, he did what he needed to do, and that's why he's one of my heroes. But as Abraham Lincoln said 160 years ago, My number one Republican hero. The dogmas of a quiet past are inadequate to the stormy present. And the unique challenges of 2021 demand unique solutions that have to be the unique new basis for a conservative movement that rises to today's occasion. And I think that means recognizing that the crony capitalism of today is not the crony capitalism of yesteryear, where in the crony capitalism of 2008, private business co-opted government to achieve its own ends. What is happening today is the exact reverse, where big government is using private big business to do through the back door what they cannot get done directly through the front door. If we take the case of big tech censorship, what we are seeing is government bureaucrats from the Democratic Party, the party in power, using big tech to do indirectly what they could not do under the First Amendment, which is to silence political opposition. That's exactly what we see at testimonies over the last year, where they call big tech CEOs and threaten them with regulation unless they take down hate speech or misinformation. And then when those CEOs go out and do that same thing, they're able to hide behind the veil of saying that this was actually private action. There's nonprofits on the left that they want to fund directly through Congress, but they fail to do so and get the votes. They go through the back door and use the DOJ to enter settlements, which ultimately siphon the federal government's money to these nonprofits through mechanisms that they could never get done through the front door. So I think that is the new form of crony capitalism that we need to recognize in our moment, one that works in reverse. We need to be bold about new solutions that recognize that private businesses can be a threat to everyday liberty too, recognizing that people are being fired every day for expressing their political beliefs in the workplace. I personally think that we need to add political belief every bit as much of a protected class to the Civil Rights Act as race, sex, sexual orientation, or religion. If you cannot be fired for being black or gay or Muslim or whatever, you should not be able to be fired for being an outspoken conservative either. If you can't be deplatformed for being brown or gay or Muslim or whatever, you should not be able to be deplatformed just because you're an outspoken Republican. And this is not an academic issue. If it can happen to the 45th President of the United States, it can happen to anybody. Now, I will be, in closing, the first to say that even these kinds of legal and policy solutions are just symptomatic therapy. And what we really need in this country is a cultural cure, a revival of an answer to the question of what it means to be an American in the year 2021. And I personally think that our absence of an answer to that question is the gaping black hole at the center of our nation's soul. And when you have a vacuum that runs that deep, that's when bad things start to fill the void. That is why wokeism has become the new modern equivalent of our opioid for the masses. Yes, my generation is hungry for a cause. Yes, we are hungry for purpose. Yes, we are hungry for meaning. But we have forgotten, as Elise told us too, that America can be that purpose. We have spent a decade celebrating our diversity that we have actually forgotten all of the ways in which we are actually the same as one people. And for me, at the top of that list of ideals that binds us together is that dream I told you about in the very beginning. The American dream, the idea that no matter who you are, where you came from, who your parents were, you can achieve anything you ever want in this country with your own hard work, your own commitment, your own dedication. And the scary feature of the last decade is that we woke up from that dream. That is the real danger of wokeness, is that when you wake up from a dream, you forget what it was all about. You might remember how it felt, but pretty soon you forget that too. And I personally think that it is not yet too late, that if the 2010s were our decade of celebrating our diversity and our differences, then let's put that in our past and let the 2020s be about celebrating what still binds us together as one people. The American dream, e pluribus unum, from many one. And if we can revive those common ideals, then nobody, not a nation, not a corporation, not a virus, is going to defeat us. That is what true American exceptionalism is all about, and that is what we will need to revive in order to defeat this new cultural epidemic. And with that, let me call to the stage Senator Ted Cruz. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thousands of years ago, the oracles foretold that freedom fighters would descend upon the Texas Hill Country, and lightning would crack the sky, and thunder would shake the earth, and the deluge would pour forth. So welcome to Texas. I'm here today to talk to you about truth and joy. But before I do that, let's talk about the threat we face. You just heard two terrific presentations about how dire the threat to liberty is today. If you look at the array that is against us, we are seeing the fruits of the 1960s. In the 1960s, the left systematically began to seize the organs of transmission of ideas. The left understood the power of ideas. So they took over education, K through 12 education. They took over colleges and universities. They took over journalism. They took over entertainment, Hollywood, movies, TV, sports, video games, music. They took over the corporate boardroom. If you look today, the best and the brightest on the left, they go follow those careers. They go purvey information and misinformation. On the right, what do the best and brightest do? They go make money. They go get a job, they go provide for their family, they open a small business, they drive the economy forward. And that is good and noble and pure, and while that is happening, our liberty and our country is being stolen out from under us. And for much of the country, we're not even in the arena of the battlefield of ideas. Colleges and universities, other than a few outliers, a Hillsdale here or there, find any college that isn't a hotbed of Marxism. Fortune 100. I challenge you, in the entire Fortune 100, name 5 CEOs who are even marginally right of center. Big media world, other than Fox and a handful of conservative outlets, all of the media is monolithically opposed to us. 100%. Movies. When's the last time you saw a movie that portrayed a businessman in a positive sense? In any respect whatsoever. Look, I'm glad when I see a business owner who's only a thief and embezzler. When they're not actively murdering children, that's a positive portrayal. All right, so where's the truth and joy? Because what we're fighting for, those are our weapons. Any assessment of the conventional odds, we got an uphill fight. The infrastructure is entirely against us. But our tools, our assets that the men and women here have are truth and joy. Look, on the issues, we are right. The great debate of the day between socialism and free enterprise. Socialism is a miserable, failing disaster. It doesn't work, and it doesn't work over and over and over again. And free enterprise is an incredible jewel, an engine of prosperity unlike anything the world has ever seen. School choice. We get to defend that kids should have the right to get a quality education, that we should empower the disadvantaged, that we should empower children to achieve their dreams. The other side gets to defend the view that we should lock kids in failing schools and leave them hopeless for the rest of their lives. You know what? I want the first side of that. On issue after issue after issue, we have truth on our side. And we also have joy. You know, the left is angry and soulless and harsh. There are few things more amusing than when the left begins to consume one of its own. When you have a woke social justice warrior who suddenly the horde comes for him or her or it or she or whoever it is. And they look around completely befuddled. No, wait, these rules don't apply to me. In this room, I've been blessed to be coming to the Heritage Resource Bank meetings for a long time. To SBN, to ALEC. This is a room of thinkers. This is a room of experts. This is a room of lovers of liberty. I don't need to explain your respective areas of expertise to you. You've devoted a lifetime to studying the principles of freedom, to thinking about how to advance them. But what I can perhaps suggest that we as a movement need to do is to think about the title of this talk, which used to be somewhere behind me, but now it's not. This is how you fight. We need to recognize the massive infrastructure on the other side. And we need to engage in guerrilla warfare. We need to engage in asymmetric battles. One of my favorite analogies is a movie I grew up on, Star Wars. We are the Rebel Alliance. The other side is the dark side. They are imperial, dark, oppressive, all-powerful, controlling, and by the way, they want to turn us all into soulless stormtroopers in uniforms that are exactly identical and have no diversity or differentiation whatsoever, but follow the orders of the empire. And let's be clear. Joe Biden is not Darth Vader. I'm not even sure Joe Biden can find his own closet. Darth Vader and the Emperor are not embodied in one person. They are embodied in collectivism. They are embodied in tyranny. They're embodied in the power that saps the human spirit. You know, it's interesting in the Senate, one of the amazing things. We've got 50 Republican senators, 50 Democratic senators. The Democrats all follow orders. Like without exception, they march in line. They don't buck their boss on anything. They have been trained as collectivists. You must obey. Look, we can use that to our advantage. Truth and joy. We can be joyful. We can be happy warriors. But we also need to think about, in guerrilla warfare, when the other side has all of the major infrastructure, part of what you do is seize infrastructure. I mentioned a minute ago that the best and the brightest on the right go make money. You know what they by and large don't do? Spend their money in any way that defends the ideas and the system that allowed them to make the money. 2013, Jeff Bezos bought the Washington Post for $250 million. Now, look, $250 million is a lot of money. It's more than I currently have in my checking account. But you know what? There are a ton of conservatives and libertarians who either have or could have access to $250 million. I am confident Jeff Bezos did not buy the Washington Post because he thought the long-term profitability from print journalism was really encouraging. On the right, what did all the right-wing titans of industry say? Well, you know, we could get a slightly higher rate of return by making widgets. Bezos bought the Post because he wanted to own the commanding heights of the ideas in our country. We've got to start engaging on that level. We've got to start engaging, by the way, of all of those organs of transmission of ideas. If you gave me one, I'd take entertainment. How is it right now that there's not a single marginally right of center movie studio in America? You've got half or over half the country. You literally have our entertainment industry pumping out movies. Did anyone watch the Oscar Best Picture nominees? I love movies. And these movies seem so dreary and dull and depressed and sad. It's like, good God, just jump in a bathtub and slit your wrists. Like, whatever happened to cheering for the good guys and beating the bad guys and overcoming odds? Think about it. A few years back, Mel Gibson made The Passion of the Christ. No studio would publish it. He made $400 million. You got half or over half the country that is being served a product that ignores what we like, what we care about, what we believe. There's not even a single capitalist in Hollywood who says, I don't even care about any of this stuff. I just see everyone serving this tiny slice of America and ignoring the vast swath of this country. Let's produce products for them. We need to think that way in the think tank community, in the grassroots community. We need to think in terms of creating output, telling stories, using humor. Oh, leftists get so mad with humor because it's so damn serious to them. That joy is powerful. You know, several years ago, there was a show on HBO. It was called True Blood. I don't know if any of y'all watched it. True Blood was a show about vampires. I was not a regular watcher of True Blood, although I watch lots of vampire shows, so that's certainly a genre near and dear to my heart. But in one of the episodes, a group of vampires arrives at a Ted Cruz fundraiser. And they kill everybody. So I'm sitting at home and suddenly my cell phone starts blowing up. And I got all these friends texting me going, dude, vampires are eating all your supporters. I'm like, okay, this sounds like a problem. So I go and watch the episode and decide to have some fun with it. So I put up a post on Facebook. I said, I'm very amused and a little bit more than astonished that HBO, I started with saying, I'm very sad to have apparently lost the vampire vote. But I'm amused and more than a little astonished that HBO seems to be acknowledging that leftists are blood-sucking fiends. And lots of folks put up comments. My favorite comment was one fellow who posted online, and he said, Ted, I'm really sorry to tell you, you never had the vampire vote. Because vampires are dead, and everyone knows the dead vote Democrat. Truth and joy. We're on the right side of this fight, but we need to recognize what it is we're fighting and fight as happy warriors. This is an ice moon on the planet Hoth. And the good news is the forces of freedom win. And y'all are the warriors gathered together in that fight. And I'm proud to be with you.
Thank you very much to our panelists. We are going to do a lightning round because we've got our nourishment for our minds and our souls, but our bodies will be wanting lunch very shortly. And so with that, I'm just going to go down the line. Senator Cruz, you inspired us, but you're inspiring us in a sense about the insurgency, and it's a little bit about what Vivek mentioned. How are you joyful in the face of that? And I'll frame it this way, which is how we'll ask it for everybody. Challenge 2021, challenge accepted. 1 year from today, what is the one thing that we will have to have done to make you feel joy?
All right, let me answer the first half of the question about how I'm joyful today, and then let's talk about what we need to have done a year from now. I'm joyful today because this is a fight worth fighting. The stakes are high. You know, before I was in the Senate, what I did for a living, I was a Supreme Court litigator. And before every argument at the Supreme Court, what I like to do for inspiration is I would pull up and watch the opening speech from the movie Patton. George C. Scott standing before an enormous American flag larger than this entire stage. If you haven't seen it, you need to go home tonight and watch it. Where he stands up there and he's speaking to the troops and he says, one of the things he says is, the goal is not to give your life for your country. The goal is to make the other poor son of a bitch give his life for his country. And he goes on, and it's a variant of St. Crispin's Day speech. But he points out, men, you will consider yourself lucky. You will consider yourself blessed. That when you are old and gray, and your grandchildren asked, where were you during the big one? You won't have to tell them I was shoveling shit in Louisiana.
No offense to our friends from the Pelican Institute.
I'm from Texas. Yeah. Texas and Louisiana have a long history of love between us.
Wonderful.
Look, I derive joy from the fact that we have the chance to be part of a battle that matters. We have the chance to fight for something that makes a difference. It's not small and marginal and inconsequential. If we lose this fight, we lose the greatest country in the history of the world. And if we win this fight, we preserve liberty for generations. That is something to give you joy for. Now, what would give me joy a year from today? I actually am very optimistic because in Washington, they are going so crazy far to the left. Biden and Schumer and Pelosi, today's Democratic Party is driven by the radical left. This is the most extreme and radical administration we've ever seen in the history of our nation. And I believe politics historically has been a pendulum. That when one party seizes power and goes too far the one direction, that the country tends to pull it the other direction. So I think 2022 is going to be a massive course correction. I think 2024 is going to be an even bigger course correction. And so what will give me joy a year from now is seeing people wake up that, holy cow, this doesn't make sense. Holy cow, these guys are nuts. What will give me joy is all of the creative thinkers here finding ways to tell stories that get young people. You know, in California, the numbskulls there in the middle of COVID took a bulldozer and filled a skate park with sand so teenagers couldn't ride skateboards. These are joyless totalitarians, and the more we can communicate and get people realizing freedom is really cool, that's what will give me joy.
Thank you very much, Senator. Vivek, same question. A year from now, what challenge can we have accepted that will give you joy? But frame it in maybe this way. You talked about the cancer. How do you kill the cancer? How do you kill the cancer without killing the host?
Oh, yeah, this is the question of our time. And the way I sort of say it is we as conservatives are about defending the castle of capitalism, and we've defended the front door without realizing they've actually invaded through the back door, and we need to rid ourselves of that villain without burning down the castle. And that's actually going to be the unique challenge of our time. And I think actually it's different than beating biological cancer, where there you just go after it, stamp it out, and get it to zero. It doesn't work with this cultural cancer. You'll just inflame it and create even greater offshoots of the same thing, a metastasis, if you will. So I've spent a lot of my efforts in the private sector, and I continue to today, including through the rollout of my book and other efforts, fighting this so-called diversity, equity, and inclusion agenda. In the name of diversity, we've sacrificed true diversity of thought. In the name of equity, we've actually sacrificed true equality of opportunity. In the name of inclusion, we've created this new exclusionary culture where certain points of view are just not welcome. But one of the things I've learned, and it's a mistake that I have made and I have learned from in the last year, is that you don't beat this by fighting it directly because you just strengthen the other side by validating their claims. Instead, what I want to see, what will give me satisfaction a year from now, is filling that void with something, as Elise said, something positive that we build from the ground up. I say, let's get rid of DEI and let's fill it with EOC. Excellence, opportunity, and civility. These are the kinds of affirmative values that we need to build up. And I loved what the senator said about the next generation, because at the end of the day, I'm actually pretty optimistic that young people, teens, high school students, college students, They want to be countercultural. They want to be heterodox. They want to stand up to the system. Maybe that's why they became progressive hippies 50 years ago. But today, if you want to be countercultural, you want to be heterodox, you want to stand up to the system, join the conservative movement, actually. And that's actually a new calling card to get a young army behind, I think, the principles that we're talking about here. And I'm optimistic that with the right turn of tide, we've hit the point where actually this can actually tip the other way like a domino effect for the next generation in our direction.
Vivek's book comes out in August. Is that right?
August 17th. Yeah.
August 17th. Elise, same question.
Available on Amazon and any other place you buy your books.
Already, actually.
Same question to Elise, and this will close us out. What challenge can we accept today that we'll be joyful about a year from now? And maybe frame it in this, philanthropy is the gateway to power, is a statement that I've heard many times. The space you're in is so important. What is the challenge that we can accept today that will make a difference and make us joyful a year from now?
That's a really good point because Vivek and I have talked about this extensively. If woke culture is a cancer, philanthropy is the source of the infection. And it is absolutely true. So many people, even people who share our values, don't realize that they're undermining their own values with their philanthropy. I'll write that $50 million check to Penn. It's going to be great. It's not. So we all need to pause and think about how we can be intentional with our philanthropy and think about advancing our values rather than undermining them. And I think that if we take on that challenge and really think deeply about what we can do in all aspects of our work, philanthropy being an important part of many people in this room and encouraging people to think more deeply about what they're doing with their money, we're going to make progress.
Thank you very much. Elise Westhoff, Vivek Ramaswamy, U.S. Senator Ted Cruz. Please join me in thanking them for being a part of our conversation today.